Welcome everyone to the First Waves podcast, which is for all of you who would like to further boost your career development and continuously improve day after day. If you want to bring even more value for your company, bet on yourself and have a great career in the corporate world, then this podcast is for you. This episode is sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, an environmentally friendly online training company that cares about your personal development. If you want to find the best courses that will help you in your career development, then please check my website www.wave-bef.com, where you will find 22 digital courses. 7 of those are for managers and 15 are for non-managers. This is a section on the website called Training for Employees, where you will find everything from short digital courses to certification programs. In case you're already a certified green belt, black belt, and even a master black belt, then we have other interesting topics for you. If you do not have a Lean Six Sigma certification yet, then we recommend taking a look at the certification programs, which will serve as a good basis. The best part is that you or your company do not need to invest money to travel to where I am, as you can participate from anywhere in the world. Today's episode is all about how you can become more resilient and successful in the corporate world when you simply optimize your breathing. I am thrilled to introduce you to my amazing guest, Fleur Conway, who is from England and lives in Spain. Over the years, she has gained much knowledge and experience in many areas of health and well-being. She is a Buteyko method breathing instructor, Oxygen Advantage Advanced instructor, a low-pressure fitness trainer, an emotional coach, and a Bach flower therapist. Overall, Fleur's aim is to help us find our balance in all aspects of our life by focusing on breath, body, mind, and soul using easy and accessible tools. I am thrilled to introduce you to this amazing guest, Fleur. Hello, Fleur, and welcome to the podcast First Waves. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for asking me back. I'm extremely grateful to be here again. Let's go ahead.
Wonderful. The first question I have is, what does it mean to properly breathe? Because many people will think, what a weird question, because we're all breathing every day, but there's a wrong way and a right way to do it. What is the right way to do it?
Well, really, what happens is we all have to breathe for our metabolic rates, for our metabolic needs. So what is the proper way to breathe? Well, the proper way to breathe is to breathe through our nose. And this is something that a lot of people get confused about because they don't quite understand that our mouth is for eating, for laughing, for speaking, for kissing, for drinking, and our nose is for breathing. We also smell through our nose. But there's a lot of people that create bad habits and they start breathing through their mouth. There are also people that might be listening as well, and they might be saying, well, when I'm out jogging, I breathe through my mouth. So yes, we can use our mouth at certain points in time. For instance, when our needs are much stronger and we need a bigger intake of air. Or, for instance, if we're going to do an exercise where we want more of an implication of our abdominal muscles, so then we can use our mouth. But for our habitual breathing and for a functional breathing pattern, we want to be breathing through our nose. And we also want the flow of our breath to be adequate for our metabolic needs. And this is something that we tend to do, is that we breathe too hard, too fast. So we take in too much air, or the flow is too strong. So really, to answer your question, we want to be breathing through our nose, and we want our breath to be light, to be slow, and to be deep. And to be deep, that means air comes in through our nose and goes down to the lower lobes of our lungs, where we have a good implication, a good movement of our diaphragm.
Okay, so then one should not feel ashamed when one is doing the breathing and the belly just raises. So that's actually wanted in the proper breathing, right?
Yeah, we don't want our belly to be moving out really strongly. We also want our ribs to be opening and closing.
Okay,
it's not going to be where we're going to do really wide movement of our ribs. It's more of like a 3D movement. So there's a slightly opening to the front, opening to the back, and opening to the sides. But because the diaphragm is like like a jellyfish, okay, so it has that sort of like jellyfish movement as well. So when we breathe in, the diaphragm comes down, it flattens out a little bit and it comes down. So then it will be pushing more pressure into the abdominal cavity, and that's why we also have that slight movement of our abdomen moving out.
Okay.
And then the abdominal muscles help the abdomen to push in, to bring up the diaphragm once again, to push the air out of the lungs. So yes, there should be some movement.
Perfect. And for those listeners who are not yet so good on knowing all the different parts of the body, could you explain a bit where's the diaphragm? Because some people, I think, maybe are not exactly aware of where the diaphragm is and what is the function of the diaphragm.
Well, the diaphragm is the muscle that lies in between the abdominal cavity and the thorax cavity. So it just lies in our rib cage, at the lower end of our rib cage. So if one wants to feel the rib cage, you can feel the lower ribs, and just in there, the diaphragm lies. And the diaphragm is also attached to the spine. So the diaphragm actually has quite a few functions. One, it is our main breathing muscle, but it also has an implication in our posture. Wow. So it is also a postural muscle. And also, from the movement, it has a pump action on our digestive system. So it helps with our digestion, because when we're breathing in and breathing out, the diaphragm is moving like a jellyfish. Mm-hmm. So it's also having that pump action. It's helping with the lymphatic drainage and also with the blood circulation and with the digestive motility of the intestines.
That's amazing. So actually now I'm putting some dots together. When we breathe properly and use the diaphragm how it's supposed to be used, then it has so many other benefits for our health and for our body.
Yes. And, for our posture, what happens as well is that when somebody's not breathing properly, the diaphragm can get stuck or it can be stiff because it's a muscle. So if it's stiff, it's going to be giving us pain as well in the lower back area. And also our posture might be compromised. So this is why it is important to have a good posture and also to have a good breathing pattern.
Yeah.
What happens when we're very emotional or we're very anxious? Our breathing changes.
Yeah.
But sometimes we feel like, within our tummy, we feel some tightness. And it's not only in our tummy, but it can be our diaphragm. Our diaphragm clenches. Oh. So if we're not aware of our emotions and the way we're breathing, then that tension can stay in the diaphragm.
So that could also explain why some people, when they're nervous, they cannot catch a deeper breath, that they just feel like they want to get some air, but they just do not feel that they can really go deeper into their lungs, and they just have a very short and shallow breathing. Yeah.
It can be because of the diaphragm is already contracted, so it's tense, so it can't move properly. What happens when we've got a muscle that's contracted? It doesn't move properly, so it can't relax. So this is what happens. When it can't relax, it can't come back up to its resting position. When it doesn't come up to its resting position, there's still like air in the lungs, so they can't get more air in because there's stagnant air in the lungs. When people get nervous, there's also that implication of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. So sometimes, we can go into that either a hyperventilation pattern or a pattern of where we hold our breath, we freeze. So it depends on what the person's doing.
And as many of us probably lost, I would say, sensitivity on really using our diaphragm properly, are there actually some exercises that one can do to start exercising that diaphragm so that you can have full range of motion and that you can subconsciously really then use it and not just use it for those few minutes when you're thinking about it, but to really make it like a constant throughout the day so it's your new default state, the way how you use your diaphragm?
Well, to relax the diaphragm, I show a lot of people how to do self-massage. So basically, you feel where your ribs are because your diaphragm is lying just underneath the rib cage. So basically what you do is you're feeling around the rib cage on either side. So I would just feel underneath the rib cage and feel for any tension. and I would go on either side. So on the right side, we have the liver. And sometimes when there's stagnant liver or whatever, there can be a little bit of pain or it's uncomfortable. So one has to go slowly. And then on our left side, we have the stomach. Mm-hmm. So if we've just eaten, we have to be careful because otherwise we'll be pushing on the food. So to do this exercise either when we first got up in the morning or before we have breakfast or later on in the day. So just to run the hands down the rib cage and then slowly move our hands further in underneath the rib cage. And here we'll be touching the fascia of the diaphragm. So we will be releasing tension. If we find a spot that's very sensitive or that's very painful, then we can either release a little bit of tension or we can just hold the tension there with our fingers until that area releases. And if we do this every day, we can do it in the morning when we wake up, before we get out of bed. If we've had a good night's sleep, we should feel nice and relaxed. And so we're just lying there. We just place our hands just by our ribs and then just slowly go underneath our ribs. We don't have to do it hard, just slowly and little by little. And there's also another exercise that we can do. And all we have to do is we naturally inhale and exhale through our nose. And then without taking any air, we pinch our nose closed and then we take a false inhale in. So it's like we want to breathe in. And when we do that, our diaphragm will move. And so here, what we're doing is we're moving the diaphragm. So that also helps release tension.
Wow, that's interesting. It just reminded me of some device I've seen some people use in the hospitals when after an operation that they have to somehow inhale into a tube and then there are like 4 little balls that go up, and then you just have to like practice to have the strength to be able to inhale so that those 3 little or 4 little balls go up to that device. Is that also doing something for the diaphragm or is that something totally different?
Yeah, but that is more aimed at the actual lungs. Okay. To get the lungs moving, because the lungs, they're a little bit like sponges actually. Yeah. When the lungs aren't used, when they're out of a body, they will literally shrink and shrivel. But if you blew air into them, they would go and they would expand. So basically, with those apparatus, with those little contraptions that you're saying with the balls, it's also to help that person regain the elasticity of the lungs and to get the lungs moving and more of a spongy. But I mean, it also, obviously, it does have an effect on the diaphragm because the diaphragm is the main breathing muscle.
Exactly. So what would be your theory? Why do we as humans lose touch with the way how we use our diaphragm, the way how we breathe? I think most people breathe wrong because they're very shallow. From what I understood, people breathe mainly in their chest area. And why do you think that actually happens? What is the root cause?
Well, it can be many things, but I mean, I think mainly, basically what is happening in our lives and, the way that we live, we are more and more disconnected with life itself, with nature, with taking it slow. And taking it slow doesn't mean that we have to be on holiday all the time. It's just being more in the now, being aware of our environment, on what we're doing. We seem to be totally in this hyped up, on the go, on the go, on the go, on the go. We have more stresses. Whoever you talk to, oh, I'm stressed, oh, I'm stressed, oh, I'm stressed. Everything, and especially now with the technology, with the WhatsApp, with emails, with the social media, it's pings, 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 and answer now, 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 now. Everything is immediate, immediate, immediate. When we're babies, we're actually born, unless we have an anatomical problem or we're born with some type of problem, we breathe in a good way. We breathe with a proper breathing pattern. We breathe through our nose. Maybe with a cold, maybe with some kind of illness, or for whatever reason, we have had a stuffy nose and then we just got into the habit of breathing through our mouth. And that bad breathing habit has become a habit and then has become the breathing pattern.
Wow.
One of the things that they do in native, I'm not quite sure exactly where, but there is a native tribe that what they actually do is that if they see that their babies are opening the mouth, then they gently close the mouth and keep the lips sealed. because they don't want that to become a habit and then become their breathing pattern. The other thing is as well, the foods that we eat. To have a good development of the jaw, the facial structure, which also helps develop the nasal cavities when we're young, it depends as well on what we eat. Native people, they eat raw foods. They also eat meat. Whether we agree with eating meat or not, they will eat more natural foods.
Yeah.
They're not processed foods, and they're not soft smoothies, in the hard form. So they have to really use their bite. They really have to use all their muscles. So by using all their muscles, their facial structure, it develops properly, which also develops the nasal cavity, which helps develop the airway. So there are a lot of things.
Amazing. For this podcast, as we are focusing on employees, there's a lot of situations when they have higher stress levels at work, and it could be before a crucial meeting, or maybe if they're going to meet with their manager, or presenting a new idea, participating in certain activities, or maybe even facilitating a workshop, and many other things that could increase their stress levels. What can you recommend these employees to practice before entering these stressful situations so that they can be more calm and resilient throughout that meeting or throughout that workshop?
Well, I think one of the things that happen to all of us is that we overthink. We can get stuck in that mindset of, have I written enough? Do I know what I'm going to say? We go over and over and over. Oh my gosh, I've got to say this and I've got to say that. I mustn't forget to say this. Oh, what was I going to say? And, we get stuck in our thoughts. Whereas if we come into the now and we come into the moment, because the thing is as well, with situations, we can, unless we're in that situation, we don't know how everything's going to develop. So we can prepare, but it gets to a point that we've done our preparation. And then we just have to sort of like sit back and say, okay, now I'm going to come into the now. I'm going to calm myself. I'm going to calm my mind. So instead of thinking, oh, I mustn't forget this, I mustn't forget that, I have my mind in the now, I'm calm. And then when I go into that presentation, I will have all the information because I've prepared. I will have all that information in my mind. But when I'm in that situation, I'll know what to do, what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. But if I'm continuously still in that preparation mode, when I get into that moment, I won't be able to access it.
Yeah.
So what can we do? Come into the now. How can we come into the now? We can take a walk out in nature. We can connect to our breath. We can connect to our body. So that means sitting in a quiet place, taking a moment away from everybody and just calming our mind and focusing on our body or on our breath, or sitting out in the garden or on a bench and listening to the birds, looking at the trees, just coming into the now. But there's also a breathing exercise that we can do. Well, there's various breathing exercises that can be done. But with the breathing exercise, it always depends as well what the basic breathing pattern is of that person. So if the basic breathing pattern of that person is very dysfunctional, they will be able to do these breathing exercises, but their body will always, mind will also always go back into that pattern once again.
Yeah.
So there's an exercise which is called the box breathing. So basically what it is, it's like drawing a box. So we would inhale for say like 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds. Then breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, and hold for 4 seconds. Now what this does, it balances the autonomic nervous system. So when we inhale, what we're doing is we are activating the autonomic nervous system, so we are alert. And then when we're doing the exhale, we are bringing the parasympathetic nervous system back into action to bring us back into the relaxation. So this is a balancing exercise, but it depends. If that person is extremely hyped up, this might not be enough. But if we can come from that balanced state, from that being in the now, this could be a quick exercise. This, for instance, is an exercise that a lot of the Navy SEALs and the first responders use.
Yeah.
You know, when they're driving along in their fire brigade or they're going to do a raid or whatever, they will access into this breathing pattern.
Wow, that's really interesting. And to verify if we're going to practice this correctly, when I breathe in those 4 seconds, is my goal also to fill in the lungs to their fullest capacity, or just like 80% of my lung capacity? What is the recommendation?
Really, it's to where you feel comfortable.
Okay.
Again, we don't have to think, oh, we've got to fill our lungs to the full, because it's not an exercise to fill the lungs. Because again, taking big breaths doesn't mean that we are going to have more oxygen to the brain. So it's not a question of taking a big breath. Taking a big breath is not the same as taking a deep breath. Taking a deep breath is when we're taking the air down to the lower lobes. If you try and take a big breath now, how would you do it?
Probably through the mouth, which is wrong.
Right, and what else has happened? You came up with the upper chest.
True, that's the first thing.
When we take a big breath, we have to do it through our mouth to be able to take that big breath. And what we're doing is we're actually doing it with our upper chest. So when we're taking it with our upper chest, we have a certain amount between our mouth area, our throat area, and where the lungs start. That is dead space. So if we're just using the upper area of our lungs, most of the air stays in the dead space.
Yeah.
So to take a deep breath, it has to be a slow breath.
Okay. I was doing a lot of wrong breathing in the past, and that was probably the reason why when I was giving presentations that sometimes my vocal cords would not keep up very long throughout the presentations because I was not doing the right breathing, and I was probably very shallow breathing. Yeah, so it was not optimal, first of all, for my nervous system, and second of all, for the vocal cords.
That's another thing. So if somebody's going to have to give a big presentation or spend a lot of time over Zoom or teaching, etc., yes, they have to be careful of their vocal cords. How they breathe is going to affect their vocal area, but also it is important for that person to make pauses.
Yeah.
To make pauses, to close the mouth, and to breathe through the nose. Because when you're talking, you do use your mouth. So a lot of the breathing does become through the mouth. That's why it is important to do the pauses and to breathe through the nose.
Okay.
And also that when we're taking the air in, to make the air smooth. So then we're not creating all this pressure around the throat.
Okay. And one final question on the box breathing. When I exhale, it's probably the same principle as with the inhale. So we should not try to inhale as much air as possible, as well as not exhale as much as possible. It's just to do constant, comfortable breathing, natural breathing, yeah.
It's just natural breathing, but what you do is that you inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And it's called box because you do the same amount of seconds. Normally it's recommended 4 seconds, but there are a lot of people that find that a little bit difficult, so we bring it down to 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah. And if we have employees who are now into that conversation with their manager, or they're in this stressful meeting at work and they realize that their stress levels are increasing, would they then think about that box breathing as well, or would there be another technique that one could apply?
Well, really what we can do is that, say we're in front of somebody and there's a situation that's not going quite right, but we want to keep calm. We don't want to make things worse. We don't want to take the conversation to make it go out of tune, or we don't want to get irritated or whatever. We can actually bring our attention to our breathing. When we're bringing our attention to our breathing, what we can do then is that we can breathe in for 4 and exhale for 6.
Okay.
Or breathe in for 3 and exhale for 5. Or breathe in for 2 and exhale for 4. It's always important to have the exhale at least 1.5 times longer than the inhale, because that is what will bring us into that parasympathetic mode. That's what will bring us into that relaxation mode. So when we're getting into that stressful situation, if we bring our attention onto our breathing, even though that other person is going on at us, or there's tension, we can bring our attention to our breathing. We can make our exhalations longer, And so what that's going to do, it's going to bring us back into that relaxed mode. So we're going to bring that balance once again into our autonomic nervous system. So then we will be able to carry on with that situation, but from balance.
Okay.
Without reacting.
That explains a lot. When I was interviewing a yoga teacher a couple episodes back, what is very interesting is that we did that conversation live. So she was here in the recording studio and the microphone was very close to her mouth, so that when we were doing the editing, you can actually hear the person breathing, and that's you can actually eliminate from the recording. But what I noticed, that she is a yoga teacher, she was doing exactly what you just mentioned. When I was speaking, she was breathing in, felt like about 4 seconds breathing in, but she made a very long exhale. And she was doing that regularly throughout the conversation when I was speaking. Then she was doing that breathing technique, probably focusing on her breathing to keep that nice, calm atmosphere. And she just does not get herself nervous or too anxious throughout the conversation.
Yeah. It's focusing on the exhalation, because the exhalation is what's going to bring you into that relaxed mode. But we really shouldn't be hearing anybody breathing.
Okay.
So when you can hear somebody breathing, their breathing is too hard. Again, when you asked me the other time, how should our breathing be? Our breathing also should be silent.
Okay.
If we heard an animal breathing heavy, we're not going to think of a dog, because a dog, when they're panting, they're normally regulating their temperature. But if, let's say, a cat or a cow or a horse, if you heard them breathing heavily, what would you think?
As a person, I don't know much about animals because I was not around a horse so often before, but I would probably be a little bit scared.
Okay, you probably think, what is wrong with that animal?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with it. I shouldn't really be hearing it breathing.
I would probably be a bit scared because I would think that the animal is feeling stressed out. And I was thinking, maybe if the animal is stressed, I better keep the distance because I don't want to make it more stressed.
Okay, well, that's very, very interesting what you've just said, that maybe that animal is stressed. So then if we relate that to human beings, to people, what do we do when we are stressed? We breathe heavily.
Yeah. Wow.
So if we're breathing heavily, even though we think that we are trying to keep ourselves in a relaxed state, if our breath is heavy, we are actually sending signals to our brain that we are under threat.
Yeah.
So we're not actually coming into a relaxed state because we are constantly, through our breath, giving feedback to our brain saying, we're stressed. And so the brain says to the body, we're stressed. So actually, we're just doing that feedback of stress.
So true. It's like that vicious cycle that it is so important that we are aware about that, because sometimes people just fall into that vicious cycle and don't even realize it. Yeah. So now that we heard about this and that we are listening to this podcast, it's really good to be aware that this happens and that one is more conscious about how is your body reacting in certain situations.
Well, not everybody is aware of their breathing. You know, we're aware of what we eat, of what we drink, of what we do, etc. But we don't actually take note of how is our breathing. You know, and our breathing during the day and during the night. And during the day, when we're working, when we're driving, when we're sitting in the bus, when we're talking, when we're reading, when we're watching telly, it's that breathing that we should be observing.
Exactly, because that's the most hours that you are spending throughout the day where you're not really aware of what is happening. What is your body doing unconsciously? And I have 2 final questions for this conversation today. How do you think can proper breathing help employees be better at what they do at work?
If they've got a proper breathing pattern, they're going to be more balanced within themselves. They're going to be more connected with their cells. They're going to be more connected with their outer world as well as their inner world. So this is going to allow them to keep balance also within their limits. They will know what they can do, what they can't do. So it will also help them to have more emotional intelligence in the sense of to be able to say, well, I can't take this on, I've got to do this, and I've got to do that, but from a balanced state. When you've got a functional, proper breathing pattern, you also have the breathing pattern that your body needs. So this also means for your metabolic needs, but also oxygen delivery to your brain. And oxygen delivery to the brain will help memory, will help focus, concentration, creativity, There won't be all this emotional chitter-chatter going off. They'll be more balanced. Another aspect as well is that if we have an optimal breathing pattern, our sleep will also be good, unless we have some kind of issue that's external from our breathing pattern. But our breathing pattern also affects our sleep. So if our breathing is out, our sleep will be out. And how can you function properly if you haven't had a good night's sleep?
Yeah. And I think that's probably something that almost everybody has experienced.
So low battery and on caffeine.
Cannot function. Yeah, you're just running on low battery the whole day.
And so it's like, the energy level is down, but then the caffeine is spiking me up, and then I can't concentrate, and then, oh my gosh, I can't get there, and I really can't keep focus, and I've got mental fog. And actually, as I've just mentioned to you about mental fog, makes me think of women. It is very, very important for women to also understand that their menstrual cycle can affect their breathing, which then can also affect their sleep as well. So they might find that during their menstrual cycle, they will have ups and downs with their breathing pattern and also with their cognitive state, with their focus, with their anxiety, etc., etc.
Is it something that if they would really focus on that, would they be able to identify it during that cycle that they are breathing different? Breathing more shallow, or that breathing, how is it different?
Yeah. When they're in their cycle, when the progesterone goes up, the progesterone actually induces breathing. It makes us breathe more. By breathing more means that we have more rapid breathing. Our breathing can become more shallow. If our base pattern is optimal and is balanced, when we have these little situations and when our cycle sort of comes up and down, we can regulate much better because our body is prepared for that, because it's already in a baseline that is in balance. But the problem is when it's out of balance. So if our sympathetic drive is hyped up, we're in chronic stress. When we have our hormonal cycle, which makes us breathe faster when our progesterone is higher, then this stress level is going to spike up even more.
Wow.
That's why it's so important to have that functional baseline.
So interesting. That's really amazing. That's something that I've never heard about before. And that's why it's so important that also that the listeners know about this, what breathing can affect on their performance at work and also in anything else that we're doing throughout the day that requires our concentration. Just like a spiral. Yeah, either you have a spiral where you're always making things better because you're breathing better, you're sleeping better, you're feeling better, or you have the opposite spiral where you're just not breathing well and then you're not sleeping well and then you're having a bad day at work and like this is just spirals all the way back down. Yeah. So that's therefore so important that we think about the topic breathing and to do it properly. And my final question for today, Fleur, is what are your services that you offer your clients?
Basically, what I do is I help people to have that balanced baseline. So I work one-to-ones, I do consultations, I do group sessions, I also work with children, and I also work with women who are going through the menopause, because that's the other time as well when we can have the hormonal fluctuations. That also affects our breathing and also affects our stress levels, emotional, etc., etc.
Perfect. Excellent.
And I also do a lot of educational podcasts, webinars in the education.
From what I've also seen, you have a lot of topics that one can go deeper into different rabbit holes, and you can definitely help them in those topics as well. It was a great pleasure having you here in this podcast today. Thanks a lot, Fleur. All the links to how to contact Fleur, like the website and all the other contacts through social media, I will be putting it into the show notes. So thanks for being there, Fleur, and I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This was a lovely and eye-opening conversation. I hope this episode with Fleur has made you curious about the way you breathe and how it influences your overall performance at work. In the show notes, you will find all the links on where to find and contact her. Before you listen or do anything else right now, I encourage you to pause for a moment, reflect on what was discussed, and choose at least one action point out of this episode and try it out. Feel free to let me know how it went through any of my social media channels or email. These links you will also find in the show notes. Your feedback is important to my team and me so we can continuously improve the value we deliver as we want to give you the most from each episode. Please rate, subscribe, and send in your comments and share with those who you think could profit from this episode. It's very much appreciated and I'm grateful for your messages. I am also a work in progress and I strive to do things better every day. This podcast is sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, where we believe that investing in yourself is the best investment you can make. On the website www.wave-bef.com, you will find a total of 22 courses. 7 of those are designed for managers and 15 courses are designed for employees who strive to become the leaders of tomorrow. If you do not have a Lean Six Sigma certification, then you will find an outstanding certification program with Wave. In case you already have a certification, then we have other courses that will further enhance your skills. On the website, take a look under the tab called Courses for Employees to see what course resonates with you. All of these courses are designed to take you to the next career development level. Thank you, stay tuned, and see you in the next episode.